So we'll start down here. We're going to look at the circulatory system, the arteries and veins. Starting here, we have the heart, and you can see we scratched in a few lines into the clay to indicate the coronary arteries. Those are the arteries that nourish the heart muscle itself. Coming out of the heart, you see the aorta. This is the ascending aorta because it goes up, and then it comes down and turns into the descending aorta, which comes in back behind the heart, and then we can pick it up all the way down here. Other blood vessels coming up, branching off of that aorta, we have the carotid artery, which goes up to the neck. That is what you feel when you feel your pulse in your neck, the carotid artery. We also have the subclavian artery. You probably can't see that because it's subclavian, that is behind the clavicle. So the subclavian comes back here. The subclavian turns into the axillary artery. The axillary artery is in the shoulder. That then turns into the brachial artery. The brachial is in the upper arm. The brachial artery then branches into the radial artery, which is lateral. It's in line with the thumb of the mannequin. And it also branches into the ulnar artery, which is medial and in line with the pinky of the mannequin. Coming down here, picking up the descending aorta, it turns into the iliac artery, which is in the hip, think ilium. The iliac turns into the femoral artery, think femur. That then loops back behind the leg. And you can see that just like in the arm, it branches. And in back here, we have the posterior tibial. Think tibia, and posterior means back. And then we also see this other branch, which cuts through the connective tissue between these two bones and comes to the front. And that is the anterior tibial artery. The veins follow a very similar pattern. Coming out of the heart, you have the superior vena cava. Actually, it's going into the heart. And then going into the heart from below is the inferior vena cava. The inferior vena cava continues all the way down the length of the body. There's also a subclavian vein back behind the clavicle. The one going to the neck, it's not the carotid vein though. The one going to the neck is actually called the jugular vein. So it's carotid artery, jugular vein. And then instead of doing the deep veins like we did with the arteries, we chose to do the superficial veins, that is the ones closer to the surface of the body. On the lateral surface, we have the lateral edge, we have the cephalic vein. That's the one that bulges out when you flex your arm if you're super buff like myself. And on the medial side, you have the basilic vein. Connecting the two is the medial cubital. That is the blood vessel that is used to take blood from an individual. And then these loop across on the back side, and if you look at the back of your hand, you may be able to see these veins on your own body. Picking up from the inferior vena cava, we see the iliac vein. That turns into the femoral vein, and then the femoral vein, just like before, branches off here into the posterior tibial vein and the anterior tibial vein. And finally, I didn't mention this with the arteries, but I will now. There should be two tiny little branches that come off. This is the renal vein, and my renal artery seems to have come off, but there it is right there, and it should also attach back here. Those are the arteries and veins.
Great.